Okay, good morning, everybody. Shall we start? Excellencies and distinguished delegates, we shall now take up agenda item 4 on review of the work of the Secretariat and UN system at the regional level. I also note that the Secretariat has circulated the following documents: ESCAP/CDR/2021/INF/1 overview of the work of the Secretariat and the United Nations system at the regional level, and ESCAP/CDR/2021/2 scaling up cooperation frameworks to manage cascading risks. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Bonaparte, Director of the Information and Communications Technology and Disaster Risk Reduction Division, to deliver a statement on the agenda item. Ms. Bonaparte, please.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all, and thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I would like to briefly report to the committee on the progress of the work of the Secretariat under its 4 work streams that the committee
Tiziana, it seems that you accidentally muted yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. Very sorry about that. I accidentally muted myself by pressing, one of these funny buttons on the laptop. Okay, so let me just repeat the 4 work streams of the ESCAP work under DRR is 1, multi-hazard early warning systems, 2nd, data and statistics, 3rd, technology innovations and applications, and 4th, knowledge for policy. So on the multi-hazard early warning systems, in support of international cooperation mechanisms and in partnership with our members and associate members of the Commission, impact-based forecasts were presented to the regional and sub-regional platforms. And notably, we presented these forecasts to the South Asian Climate Outlook Forum, the East Asia Winter Climate Outlook Forum, and the WMO/ESCAP panel on tropical cyclones. And in partnership with the WMO, the Secretariat also provided technical and capacity building support on producing impact-based forecasts that involved Thailand and Vietnam. Then in November last year, the Advisory Council of the Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Tsunami Disaster and Climate Preparedness adopted the new strategic note for 2021 to 2024, and this will guide the future work of the trust fund. In July 2020, Switzerland joined the trust fund as a new donor. And as you all witnessed yesterday, we had the pleasure of welcoming the government of Italy to the trust fund as a new donor. And the joining of the government of Switzerland and the government of Italy to the trust fund, we believe highlights the continued relevance and value of the trust fund in supporting multi-hazard early warning, people-centric multi-hazard early warning in the region. Second, on data and statistics, the Secretariat launched the Risk and Resilience Portal last Monday. It was the beginning of our Disaster Resilience Week. And then through the Regional Space Applications Program for Sustainable Development, or RESUP, the Secretariat has provided over 45 gigabytes of satellite imagery and products to member states for early warning, response, and damage assessment. And then in line with the Asia-Pacific Plan of Action on Space Applications, and also as the Secretariat for the Global Geospatial Information Management Asia-Pacific Group, the GGIM AP Group, we organized regional and sub-regional training sessions to analyze the locational impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also to support countries in developing a data hub and producing comprehensive situation maps for the pandemic using satellite imagery. The third, on technology, innovation and applications, the Secretariat has continued with its work related to developing tools for using geospatial information that is tailored to country-specific contexts. And this work took place through ESCAP's regional drought monitoring mechanism. We also promoted climate resilience agricultural development in the lower Mekong River Basin, and we supported governments of Central Asia to assess drought risks and integrate the use of statistical and geospatial data for land accounting. We're also implementing a pilot project to monitor and forecast drought in Central Asia, beginning from Kyrgyzstan. The Secretariat has also implemented capacity building activities by integrating georeference data from the ground, air, space, and from crowdsourcing. And the ESCAP publication entitled Geospatial Practices for Sustainable Development in Asia and the Pacific 2020, a compendium, presented the diverse use and the vital role of geospatial information and applications. This publication will be a biannual publication, and it will also help the Secretariat and the member states review and assess implementation of the Space Action Plan as we move forward. Lastly, the fourth pillar on knowledge for policy. The Secretariat has issued various reports addressing the intersection of the pandemic and extreme weather events. Our flagship Asia Pacific Disaster Report 2021 was launched yesterday, while the second edition of the Ready for the Dry Years publication, which is a joint publication series of ASEAN and ESCAP secretariats, this publication supported the ASEAN Declaration on Strengthening of Adaptation to Drought, which was adopted at the 37th ASEAN Summit in November 2020. I'd like to also express deep appreciation to the donor countries who have made it possible for the program to deliver these results. And besides our trust fund donors, I would also like to acknowledge the contributions that we have received from the Russian Federation, from the Republic of Korea, and also from Japan. So thank you very much, and I hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonapace. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Letizia Lozano, Director, Asian and Pacific Center for the Development of Disaster Information Management, ESCAP, to deliver a statement on the agenda item.
Thank you. I am pleased to present you with a brief report of the program of the Asia-Pacific Center for Development of Disaster Information Management, APDIM, since the last session of the committee in August 2019. The current global COVID-19 crisis is yet another testimony of the scale and magnitude of loss and damages that disasters can impose on nations and communities. As you heard throughout this week, we must work in an integrated way on disaster risk reduction, health, and climate resilience if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Since APDIM's establishment in 2018 and in accordance with its mandate, the Center strived to contribute to disaster risk reduction in the region through a number of initiatives, including improving the understanding of needs and priorities on disaster information management. For example, APDIM conducted the assessment of the gaps and needs for disaster risk information and data management platforms in Asia and the Pacific region. This study resulted in a series of important recommendations and proposed solutions, which, among others, informed APDIM's own strategic plan and program design. We also deepened our understanding of risk factors, including hazards, vulnerabilities, and exposure, and developing tools and methodologies with the aim of helping countries and organizations of the region to effectively reduce the risk and negative impacts of disasters, in particular, those triggered by transboundary hazards such as sand and dust storms. In this regard, APDIM, in collaboration with partner countries, academic centers, and experts, just completed the sand and dust storms risk assessment in Asia and the Pacific. And I'm pleased to announce that this report will be launched later today during a dedicated side event organized by APDIM, focusing specifically on the potential for concerted action at regional level to reduce risk and strengthen resilience. APDIM also developed a guideline on monitoring and reporting the impact of sand and dust storms through the Sendai Framework Monitor. This tool has filled a significant gap in supporting countries to report on the socio-economic impacts of sand and dust storms through the Sendai Framework Monitor. We are also contributing to the expansion of regional cooperation and facilitating the exchange of data, information, and knowledge on disaster risk reduction and management. APDIM has been expanding its cooperation and partnership with other regional and international organizations, such as the Economic Cooperation Organization, ECO, and the UN Economic and Social Commission for West Asia, ESCAP, as well as with academic centers such as Tohoku University in Japan. We also revamped and upgraded our online and social media presence. APDIM has taken the opportunity of remote working modalities for convening and participating as panelist and moderator in several key webinars in the region, strengthening partnership and generating awareness about the importance of cooperation on transboundary hazards like sand and dust storms. Collaboration with UN partners such as the UN Coalition on Combating Sand and Dust Storms, the World Meteorological Organization, the UNCCD, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and UNESCO has also significantly grown in the period under review. Distinguished participants, despite the challenges caused by the COVID-19 crisis and related resource limitations, APDIM has been able to implement over 80% of its programs in 2020. In 2020, APDIM also moved to its premises in the Sepang building in Tehran, having signed the administrative and financial agreement between ESCAP and APDIM's host country. In this connection, I wish to take this opportunity to express my deep thanks to the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran for hosting the center and providing significant financial and non-financial contributions to APDIM. I'm also grateful to other ESCAP member states that provided financial and technical support to the center. Guided by its multi-year strategic program of work and with the stewardship of its governing council, APDIM will strive to further enhance disaster information and knowledge management in the region and contribute thus to effective disaster risk reduction and resilience building for sustainable development in Asia and the Pacific. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Rossano. I now have the pleasure to invite Mr. Marco Toscano Ribalta, Chief of the Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Chair of the Issue-Based Coalition on Resilience, to deliver a statement on the agenda item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, distinguished representatives and colleagues. It is an honor to address the committee on behalf of the co-chairs of the issue-based coalitions on building resilience, Mr. Christophe Bouet of UNDP and myself, Marco Toscano Rivalta of UNDRR. I would also like to recognize at the outset the excellent collaboration of all UN entities members to the issue-based coalitions on resilience. As we heard, the last year and a half have been defined by unprecedented disruptions. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with devastating climate-related disasters, have complicated further the region's already difficult path to realizing the SDGs. In response, the United Nations Development System in Asia and the Pacific established 5 regional issue-based coalitions, or IBCs, in July 2020 to address the region's most urgent needs. The issue-based coalitions on building resilience brings together 21 UN entities to accelerate actions on disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptations, and resilience building. Progress in these areas and implementation of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction would enable the achievement of the SDGs in light of the mounting cost of disasters in the regions. If unaddressed, these disasters could erase development gains and even toward the graduation pathways of countries from the least developed category. Guided by a joint work plan, the IBC was able to start delivering results soon after its formations. Its achievements include, first, the development of knowledge products and policy guides. A notable example is the study Recovering from COVID-19, Lessons from Past Disasters in Asia and the Pacific, which highlights 10 good practices that could aid recovery based on past disasters in the region. Another example is a review of COVID-19 disaster risk governance in Asia Pacific, which looked at national disaster risk reduction guiding documents of 28 countries to offer recommendations on how to strengthen risk governance systems to prevent future disasters. Second, it helped build the capacities of UN country teams. As such, 10 countries' offices have received training on integration of disaster risk reduction and climate adaptations into UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. Third, it organized knowledge exchanges. Through a webinar conducted in collaboration with the World Health Organizations, countries have exchanged national experiences in integrating health and disaster risk reduction. Looking ahead, the IBC will further support countries and UNCTs to build back better through the integration of health, climate and disaster risk reduction approaches, also in line with the Bangkok principles for the implementation of the health aspects of the Sendai framework. We thank the committee for the chance to introduce the regional issue-based coalition on building resilience, and we look forward to supporting the implementation of its recommendations. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toscano Ribalta. I now have the pleasure to invite distinguished delegates to share views and comments on the agenda item. I would like to open the floor for interventions from members and associate members of the Commission first, and then to observer countries and organizations. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from the Philippines, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the distinguished permanent representative.
First Philippines, then second Russia.
Yes. So the first speaker on my list is a distinguished delegate from the Philippines, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the distinguished permanent representative from the Russian Federation. Distinguished delegate from the Philippines, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Philippine Space Act marks the Philippines' formal recognition of the increasing strategic importance of space, especially for hazard management and climate studies.
Russian Federation,
The Philippines recognizes the challenges brought about by the climate change and COVID-19 and we look to the enabling role of space in strengthening our capability and providing creative solutions and assistance to critical sectors during these times. In this regard, the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA, is conducting its decadal survey on the use of space applications derived from Earth observation and telecommunication satellites. Through gap analysis of our current capabilities, we will be able to identify priority missions to ensure inclusive and sustainable conduct of activities and utilization of space technology in the country, especially for disaster risk reduction and management, or DRRM. Furthermore, the development of the next generation of Philippine satellites, such as the Multispectral Unit for Land Applications, or MULA, is already underway. MULA will focus on environmental and disaster applications and will be capable of capturing near real-time images essential for timely disaster response and decision-making. Finally, the Philippines also prioritizes digitalization programs focusing on improving data governance and utilization, and strengthening mechanisms that promote interoperability of various DRR platforms and the underlying ICT infrastructure. In this regard, PhilSA continues to support initiatives in the country aimed at lowering barriers to accessing satellites for more pervasive internet connectivity that is vital to productivity and our country's efforts in enhancing DRRM. We also cite programs such as the Philippines Space Data Dashboard and the GeoRisk PH platform that utilize remote sensing techniques, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to provide data-driven recommendations for DRRM and assist in the creation of a streamlined decision-making process. We have shared more information on our activities with the secretariat, which are available online and electronically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from the Philippines. I see that the Russian Federation is not ready, so I would like to give the floor to, sorry. Shall we?
Yeah, Russia is coming.
Yeah.
Russia, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I see that Russian Federation is ready, so I give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative from the Russian Federation. Excellency, please.
Chair, for giving me the floor, but the thing is that we didn't raise the flag, and I don't know why you asked us to make a statement. Thank you.
Okay. Then can I ask the distinguished delegate from Maldives to take the floor? Please.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. While going through the risk portal, which was launched on Monday, I was quite amazed with the portal. It's unquestionable that risk reduction is the main key for resilience. A dedicated portal where policymakers can actually do a critical analysis on the risk will be a game changer in the field of disaster management. This portal would provide critical analysis on the linking of climate, disaster, and health. Also, perhaps be the only portal where policymakers comprehensive evidence-based analysis in terms of disaster risk reduction. A comprehensive evidence-based analysis here, I mean, is that this portal does not focus solely on hazard identification, but it also relates hazards, vulnerabilities, and risks to several and other areas like health and economic impacts. As vulnerabilities and risk increases, the probabilities of cascading disasters in a community, it is important that all our policies be risk informed. To build a resilient community, people should be informed of surrounding risks and vulnerabilities and how their actions or developmental projects can increase the risk. Every policy level decision, every project related to the people and our land should be risk informed. And I believe this risk and resilient portal will be the most convenient tool to get most updated and analysis risk profile from the region. This portal will also be good knowledge and experience sharing hub. One country could easily analysis how a certain project or a program affect the other. Learning from one another is how we grow. In addition to this, the portal will also contribute to enhance the DRR regional frameworks to develop applied holistic disaster risk profile within the countries. In order to get the full use of this portal, I would like to say that in 2006, with the support of UNDP Maldives, that was the time that we first developed our first disaster risk profile of the Maldives. Later, the disaster risk profile was updated with the help of UNESCAP in the year 2017. Since then, several development plans have been completed. Major changes are observed both in terms of structurally and non-structurally. Additionally, over the years, the vulnerabilities within Maldives and climate change have increased drastically. Disaster risks in our small islands. Some development projects is believed to contribute the increase in vulnerability within the islands. However, due to lack of technical expertise, there is no fact-based analysis done to understand the risk profile of the Maldives. While thanking the continued help and support from ESCAP in climate change and disaster risk reduction, on behalf of Maldives, I would like to humbly request you and ESCAP and other colleagues to further look into the possibilities and the ways UNESCAP could assist Maldives to revise and update the disaster risk profile of the Maldives using the risk resilience portal with both natural and biological hazards included. May God protect our countries from cascading disasters and strengthen our bond. Thank you for the opportunity. Stay safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Maldives. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Thailand, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the delegate from Japan. Thailand, please.
Excellency, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Since early 2020, the whole world has suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has been a challenge for leveraging space technology applications and integration of geospatial information for local and national institutes in the region. We have seen that in times of global pandemic, regional cooperation is an imperative. As the COVID-19 pandemic calls for borderless solidarity, regional cooperation is a key tool to strengthen our capability and to overcome challenges and find useful solutions. Thailand highlights the roles and needs for regional support for action against COVID-19, where geospatial information and relevant capacity building will be vital in leaving no one behind. we have developed the IMAP, a platform among many others that are available. IMAP has integrated geospatial information and relevant data to monitor and track COVID-19 pandemic in Thailand. The platform enables us to perform analysis for risk map on pandemic situation, vulnerability, increase of infections, vaccinations, and medical capacity and supplies. Preventive and precautionary measures, goods consumer, and so on in geospatial manners. The platform has significantly supported policymakers, government agencies to make appropriate decisions against the COVID-19 pandemic. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand will support strengthening regional cooperation to address the socio-economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and other crises through implementation of ESCAP resolution, building back better from crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. We would like to share our experience, knowledge, and operation tools with countries in this region in response to the pandemic. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Thailand. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Japan, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the delegate from Sri Lanka. Japan, please.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me a floor. Distinguished delegates, good morning. On the outset, I would like to congratulate UNESCAP on the launch of the Risk Resilience Portal Asia Pacific Disaster Resilience Network, such an important initiative for disaster risk reduction in the region. This year, 2021, marks the passing of 1 decade since the Great East Japan earthquake. Japan has actively supported awareness-raising activities in many countries so that we can pass down lessons learned to the next generations. From 2017, Japan has been implementing a program to support tsunami evacuation drill in the Asia Pacific through UNDP. Last year, more than 150,000 students in 23 countries joined the drill on the 5th November, World Tsunami Awareness Day. In cooperation with UNDRR, the program developed new guidance for school administrators that lists up additional measures to be taken with regard to COVID-19 in tsunami evacuation planning. Disaster prevention and mitigation measures are becoming more important than ever. And Japan is striving to make the world more resilient by sharing its knowledge and experience. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, adopted in 2015, stresses the importance of a multi-hazard approach and set out mainstreaming of TRR in all sectors, as well as ex-ante investment in DRR as priority actions. Mr. Chair, we must seek deep understanding of the linkages between climate change, disasters, and public health in order to better deal with the compound and systemic nature of risk. Furthermore, we need to promote stronger governance and risk-informed investment to prevent the creation of and reduce disaster risk. Japan will continue to work with ESCAP, other UN specialized bodies, and multiple stakeholders in the region to overcome the current pandemic and realize a post-COVID-19 era with a virtuous cycle of economic and environmental growth that is flexible and disaster resilient. We must do everything in our power to achieve the SDGs so that no one will be left behind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Japan. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Sri Lanka, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the delegate from Indonesia. Sri Lanka, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegate, Sri Lanka wishes to underscore the vital role that Asia-Pacific Plan of Action on Space Applications for Sustainable Development 2018-2030 is called upon to play in realizing the 2030 Agenda, including the SDGs 2030, Sendai Framework, and the Paris Agreement. Sri Lanka has made significant progress in implementing the plan of action, particularly in the thematic areas of natural resource management, disaster risk reduction and resilience, and climate action. In the meantime, as we approach the beginning of phase 2 of the plan of action in 2022, we observe in our horizon unprecedented opportunities that have been brought about by digital innovations such as artificial intelligence, big data analytics, IoT, cloud computing, and drones. These disruptive technologies can vastly augment the potential of traditional applications of space technology, and this fully justifies the theme Space Plus for our future Earth that has been proposed for the 4th Ministerial Conference on Space Applications for Sustainable Development. Mr. Chair, we also stay firmly committed to support the implementation of ESCAP Resolution 77/1 titled Building Back Better from Crisis Through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. This, we believe, represents a proactive and effective strategic response to the crisis facing the region. Let me conclude, Mr. Chair, extending our appreciation to the Secretariat, particularly the IDD Division and the Space Applications Section for their great commitment, and to our partners for their contributions in realizing the commendable progress that we have achieved so far. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Sri Lanka. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Indonesia, whom I now invite to take the floor. The next speaker will be the delegate from the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, Indonesia welcomes all countries to participate in the 4th Ministerial Conference on Space Application for Sustainable Development in Asia and the Pacific, which will take place in Indonesia in October 2022. Indonesia is implementing the Asia-Pacific Plan of Action on Space Application for Sustainable Development 2018-2030. During the past year, LAPAN has taken action in the thematic area of disaster risk reduction and resilience, including in SDG number 1 on ending poverty, SDG number 2 on zero hunger, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, SDG 13 on climate action, SDG 14 on life below water, and SDG 15 on life on land. Indonesia will support the strengthening of regional cooperation to address the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic and crisis through the implementation of ESCAP Resolution 77/1 titled Building Back Better from Crisis to Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. It highlights the role and need for regional support of action against COVID-19, where geospatial information and relevant capacity building will be vital in leaving no one behind. LAPAN has created a platform named LAPAN Hub COVID-19 to disseminate information related to daily risk spatial distribution of COVID-19. This platform is a portal and website based on remote sensing application and the Geographic Information System or GIS. LAPAN has been sharing its experiences with Asian countries through ESCAP Regional Space Application Program or RESAP. Indonesia is fully committed to working closely with the Secretariat and countries in Asia and the Pacific to implement the plan of action and COVID-19 data-driven responses. Distinguished delegates, Indonesia appreciates and thanks to the Secretariat for providing over 50 reports and 45 gigabytes of satellite imagery and product to member states for early warning, response, and damage assessment relating to various climate hazards. The Secretariat helped Indonesia receive satellite imagery from international charter, space, and major disaster, such as in the occasion of flood and landslides in Banten province on January 2020, flood in North Luwu Regency in July 2020, Mount Merapi eruption in Central Java province on November 2020, earthquake in Majene Regency in January 2021, and flood and landslide in East Nusa Tenggara province in April 2020. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Indonesia. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea, whom I now invite to take the floor.
Mr. Chairman, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sung-Jun Cha from the Ministry of Science and ICT of Korea. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as the unprecedented disaster of COVID-19 pandemic drags on, a number of structural changes in our economy and society are underway. None is perhaps as prominent as the accelerated transition to digital economy. Narrowing the digital gap and strengthening connectivity among those who are digitally isolated have become key challenges of our time for building back better and leaving no one behind. To address these challenges and actively respond to digital transformation, Korea announced the Digital New Deal strategy in last July. The core project of the Digital New Deal is collecting data in a big data platform called Data Den and converging 5G, big data analytics, and AI with the collected data for various types of industries and services. In July this year, we updated it to the Digital New Deal 2.0 based on the progress made over the past 1 year. Let me briefly go over the updated initiative. It is aimed at expanding the achievements from the previous version across the country and across all industries. Through the Digital New Deal, Korea endeavors to narrow the digital gap and promote an inclusive society to build back better, a core provision of the Sendai framework, and leave no one behind, a key aspiration of the Sustainable Development Agenda. I want to stress that multi-stakeholder engagement and international digital collaboration are essential to overcome COVID-19 and build disaster and climate resilience, as emphasized by the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. Against these backgrounds, the Republic of Korea proposes to host the first Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Digital Cooperation in October 2022 in Korea, with the objectives of strengthening regional cooperation to tackle the COVID-19, building the Asia-Pacific region back better, and advancing digital transformation. The Republic of Korea looks forward to your cooperation and participation. I wish all of you the best of health and happiness. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from China, whom I now invite to take the floor. China, please.
尊敬的主席，尊敬的各位代表，然后我来介绍一下中国的情况。然后仙台减轻灾害风险框架确立了那个4个优先原则。第一个就是了解灾害的风险，并且在这个基础上加强灾害风险治理以及管理灾害风险。第3个是投资并减少灾害风险，提高抗灾能力，加强备灾以及做出有效的反应。第4是在恢复、善后和重建方面做得更好。围绕着这4个方面，我们就是说分别也做了一些工作。首先介绍一下我们在气象领域系统性风险防范应对工作方面的情况。首先是我们积极推进了气象灾害的风险管理。首先第一个，我们开展了气象灾害的综合的风险普查，完成了全中国主要气象灾害的那个风险普查、风险区划，完成了暴雨洪涝灾害致灾阈值的确定。第2部分是推动了气候评价业务向气象灾害风险管理业务的转变，建立了基于大数据平台的综合应用业务系统，实现了气象灾害风险管理的调查、阈值的确定、灾情评估等一些所有信息的叠加分析。第3是开展了精细化气象灾害风险预警业务能力的建设。针对那个中小河流的洪水、山洪和地质灾害，我们进行了研发了一个精细化的风险预警模型，建立了空间分辨率5公里的那个精细化的风险预警业务。第2部分是我们在提升应对气候变化及其风险方面的能力。首先是对于气候事件和气候灾害的预测能力，我们研发了对于高温灾害的区域确定性的产品和区域性的确定性预测产品和概率预测产品，以及暴雨灾害的一个区域的确定性的预测产品。然后针对台风研发了就是针对未来11到20天热带气旋的那个生成的频次、生成的原地、强度和路径的一些预测产品。第2是对于开展了未来气候变化和气候风险的预估，建立了不同排放情景下中国和东亚地区超过100年以上分辨率在6.25公里的高分辨率气候变化预估数据集，然后完成了在1.5度和2度升温情景下干旱、降水、温度这些就是气象灾害的变化的预估，以及它对社会经济影响。第3是发展了气候生态环境承载力的评估技术。典型的地区进行了应用。下面介绍一下多灾种预警系统建设以及推广应用的情况。首先我们完成了亚洲区域多灾种预警发布系统的建设。在2019年，中国气象局和香港天文台共同建设了亚洲区域预警信息发布系统，用来支持不同国家的预警信息统一规范标准化的集中显示。第2是对于这个系统我们进行了积极的应用推广。在2020年6月，世界气象组织2区协的主席然后发出了一个倡导，就是提议2区协所有的成员我们来共同建设亚洲区域预警信息发布系统。截至到2021年的7月，这个系统的话已经可以实时显示中国、印度、泰国、缅甸、阿富汗、科威特、蒙古、阿曼、俄罗斯发布的预警。在未来的话，我们提议进一步加强区域合作，然后对接各国的预警信息，使亚洲区域预警信息发布系统成为一个亚洲区域多灾种多语种的一个预警信息发布平台，然后来彻底的提升和促进整个亚洲区域预警联防联动的能力。第3个就是在疫情防控常态下的一些防灾减灾工作的建议。现在已经有大量的研究表明，就是任何的自然灾害的发生发展的行为，致灾因子一些协同的作用，为次生灾害的发生提供了便利的条件，而这些次生灾害又会为其他的衍生灾害 的发生提供条件，然后从而使得整个的那个自然灾害的发生具有一种链式效应，然后在区域化与经济全球化的这么一个复杂的供应链和价值链，这样的话就是为自然灾害的影响提供了一个快速传播的一个通道。因此，我们建议就是在将来从灾害链和灾害链的角度，对自然灾害进行一个系统性的研究，寻找一种有效的灾害的预测和预警的机制，然后来更有效的进行由于灾害链的连锁效应给各国带来的损失。谢谢。
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from China. I see no more delegates who wish to take the floor. So then I would like to open the floor for interventions from observers who may wish to address the committee. The first speaker is the observer from UNECE. Please.
Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, countries in the UNECE and ESCAP regions have been severely affected by disasters most recently, ranging from flooding to forest fires and technological accidents, among others. Climate change impacts are being felt here and now. They are among the systemic risks affecting our regions. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded existing disasters, such as the tragic Port of Beirut explosion, which happened about 1 year ago. We at UNECE will organize a seminar in follow-up to this tragic accident to share experiences, good practices, and lessons learned in ammonium nitrate storage, handling, and transport in port areas, so as to prevent such accidents from occurring and to mitigate their consequences. I would like to cordially invite you to attend this online event on the 14th of December. It is organized under the lead of our Industrial Accidents Convention in close cooperation with UNDRR and other partners. Another UNECE instrument, the Water Convention, continues to support countries in flood and drought risk management, the taking of related DRR measures, and adapting to climate change. It does so by facilitating the establishment of joint bodies and agreements shared across borders. And jointly with FAO, we support countries in sustainably managing their forests so as to prevent the risks of forest fires. We would be pleased to share more of our experiences with you and to engage in a mutual learning from each other's approaches and instruments so as to strengthen our mutual efforts to reduce and manage disaster risk so as to protect our populations and the environment. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you very much, UNECE. The next speaker on my list is the observer from IFRC. Please.
Madam Executive Secretary, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants. As we've heard from the eminent speakers here today, Asia Pacific has made enormous progress in disaster risk reduction. But COVID-19 and the impacts of climate change are fundamentally changing and exacerbating the risks our communities face. Over the past year and a half, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies across Asia Pacific have been responding to emergencies on multiple fronts: the pandemic, intensifying climate and weather-related hazards, and population movements. We know firsthand the importance of early warning and early action at the community level, as well as breaking down silos and taking joined-up approaches across health, DRR, and climate sectors. Our long history and leadership on disaster law has taught us that an important place to start is making sure that our laws and strategies are fit for purpose. They must provide the enabling framework to address the disease, disaster, and climate nexus systematically in line with the Bangkok Principles. As such, we are pleased to announce new research on laws, disasters, and public health emergencies, which we will be launching in Asia on the 28th of September and October in the Pacific. We also voice our strong support to the initiative under discussion this week to develop regional and sub-regional integrated strategies. We stand ready to work with Asia-Pacific governments and partners in these initiatives. We look to build back better from COVID-19. COVID-19 recovery will be a marathon, not a sprint, but where we do need to act quickly and fairly is on vaccines. With the epicenter of the pandemic now in Asia-Pacific, our urgent priority and focus must be to scale up and ensure equitable access to vaccines for all people, irrespective of their legal status. Let me conclude by thanking the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand and ESCAP, as well as the governments and partners present here today for their partnership in our joint efforts to build resilience against the multiple risks we face and leave no one behind in our efforts. Thank you.
I thank the IFRC, and I have a request to speak from Bangladesh, so I give the floor to Bangladesh. Bangladesh, please press the button. We have a technical problem. Can you hear me, the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh? Maybe there's a technical problem, so they are not responding.
So we go ahead.
Okay.
Country statement of Bangladesh. Yeah, just received it. Didn't send speaker request form.
Bangladesh, can you hear me? No.
Bangladesh, would you please kindly press request to speak button, the blue button?
No, this is not from the embassy. Oh, yes.
Ah, yes. Yeah. So I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh, please.
Okay.
Two speakers.
Madam, would you please unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Honorable Chair, dear participants, this is Nurnaha Chaudhary, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Defense from Bangladesh. It's a great pleasure for me to get the opportunity to participate in this session. On behalf of the Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, I would like to thank ESCAP for organizing this event. We highly appreciate ESCAP's role in assisting the world build back better through regional cooperation. We hope this session will allow us to consider worldwide emerging disaster risks and explore the possible areas of regional cooperation to address those risks. Distinguished delegates, due to the geographical location, topography, and climate condition, Bangladesh is considered one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. It faces natural disasters like floods, cyclones, storm surge, landslide, lightning, river and coastal erosions every year. That's why disaster risk reduction and risk management has become an important concern in Bangladesh. With your permission, I'd like to share some of our experiences in disaster risk reduction and management. This mechanism combines our policy framework, institutional setup, technological, infrastructural, and financial arrangements. This holistic approach can be considered as a role model in disaster risk reduction. Dear participants, our strong policy framework includes our Disaster Management Act, our disaster management policy, we have a national plan, and the latest, we have national strategy on internal displaced management. Most importantly, we have a regulatory policy document known as Standing Orders on Disasters, which defines the stakeholders' roles and responsibilities for both risk reduction and post-disaster management. We have also been attached to the Sendai Framework DRR Monitoring 2018. In the institutional level, Bangladesh has a designated ministry for this disaster management, that is Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, which is leading our disaster risk reduction and disaster management activities. We have formed different advisory and working committees and groups, starting for the national level down to the lowest level of our local government, that's the Village Disaster Management Committee. And all these committees are highly active in areas of disaster risk assessment, risk reduction, early warning dissemination, emergency preparedness, disaster response, and post-disaster management. Dear Chair, Bangladesh has taken initiatives to develop disaster resilient infrastructures in the disaster prone areas. These include cyclone and flood shelters, Mujib Killas, disaster resilient houses for vulnerable families, roads, bridges, culverts, dams, etc. To reduce the disaster risks of the government has taken initiative to make disaster impact assessment, which will be compulsory for all projects in Bangladesh. As a part of institutionalization of disaster risk reduction, Bangladesh has established Cyclone Preparedness Program. This initiative began under the leadership of the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, just immediately after our independence. Initiatives have also been taken to develop similar flood preparedness program. To support disaster risk reduction and other initiatives like emergency preparedness, early warning dissemination, we have developed a trained volunteers, and the number of these volunteers is around 5 million. Dear participants, Bangladesh has an effective early warning mechanism for natural disaster. Institutions like Bangladesh Meteorological Department and Space Research and Remote Sensing Organizations are providing early warnings based on information collected through ground stations, satellite data, aerial images, and ground surveys. To provide humanitarian assistances, we have developed a social safety network to ensure basic needs such as food, shelter, health services, education, livelihood, etc. of the population who are at risk of disaster or being affected by disasters. As a part of disaster health services, Bangladesh government has lately introduced mental health support, known as psychosocial support, to the victims of disasters. Bangladesh is among the few countries in which forecast-based financing program has been initiated to support risk reduction of vulnerable groups before the disasters. In this program, vulnerable poor people receives monetary assistance as cash transfer through mobile phone banking system during the early warning period. This financial assistance allows them to take measures to reduce their risk of possible damages or losses. Distinguished participants, COVID-19 pandemic poses a threat all over the world, and that has not only taken a heavy toll of lives, but also collapsed the economy and affected the livelihood of the marginal people across the world. Since 2020, Bangladesh has to encounter the COVID-19 pandemic along with other natural disasters like Cyclone Amphan and 5 times monsoon floods. However, the government's initiatives allow the country to keep these disaster effects at minimal. Bangladesh exhibited appreciable resilience in fighting the pandemic by ensuring available healthcare supports for all and providing worthwhile financial incentives to the vulnerable groups and different important economic sectors. We extend our appreciation to our partners in the national, regional, and international levels for their contribution to support our disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management initiatives. This entire holistic disaster risk reduction approach allowed us to reduce the risk and catastrophe of natural disasters. For example, due to our risk reduction, mitigation, and preparedness approaches.
Sorry, could you please wrap up?
Sure, thank you. The number of casualties in 1970s cyclone, it was 1 million. In 2020, the casualty reduced to only 10. We firmly believe that this platform will stress on finding out the effective DRR initiatives and identify areas of mutual cooperation so that we can make this planet livable, more livable for all. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Bangladesh, I welcome you all to visit our country and explore our native measures of encountering disaster risks and their management. Thank you all.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. And I thank you all for your remarks. As I see that there are no further interventions, I would now like to call on Ms. Tiziana Bonaparte to provide concluding observations. Ms. Bonaparte, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor to conclude what has been a very comprehensive discussion. And we had interventions from 10 member states and 2 observers. And I think the common thread that ran through all the statements was very clear support for the implementation of Commission Resolution 77/1 and the principle of building back better with resilience. I'd like to, in particular, thank all the member states who expressed appreciation and support for the Risk and Resilience portal and for the recognition that was given to the potential of the portal to provide evidence, data, statistics that will help deepen the analysis of the cascading risks, the analysis of the drivers of cascading risks, and how best to mitigate and manage these risks, because as it was stressed, such mitigation and management is key to building resilience. We also took due note of the specific country requests that were given to the Secretariat for country level support in disaster risk profiles, updating disaster risk profiles to include cascading risks. And I also give assurances that we will respond positively, and we look forward to working with our member states on that. There was also a clear recognition given to the strategic role of the space sector, a growing strategic role for the space sector, not only in managing the pandemic, but also in the contributions of the space sector to disaster risk reduction, environmental management, and climate actions. So more and more of an important role that space will play in the attainment of the SDGs and the Sustainable Development Agenda. And I'd like to express my thanks also to the member states for recognizing the vital role that the regional blueprint in the form of a space action plan will play in coordinating actions at the regional level for sustainable development. And then there was a mention made of the importance of digital technology, digital innovation, and how this can further accelerate implementation of SDGs. And there was also a recognition given to the need to tackle or to address the digital divide, to bring the digitally isolated into the digital economy. And in this regard, I would like to express deep appreciation first to Indonesia for the hosting of the 4th Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Space in October 2022. And I'd also like to express deep appreciation to the Republic of Korea for offering to host the first Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on digital cooperation. So 2 important ministerial conferences coming up next year. And we are really hoping that we can finally get to meet each other in person. And we are looking forward to working with our member states in the organization of both ministerial conferences. And then finally, I'd like to thank all the countries that offered to provide technical assistance, to share knowledge, technical know-how. In particular, I'd like perhaps to acknowledge Indonesia, India, Thailand, Philippines, who all offered, and then China, who has for many years been providing very extensive and generous financial support to the program of the ICT space and disaster risk reduction. And I'd like to also acknowledge the very extensive sharing of technical knowledge and methodologies and tools, in particular through the drought monitoring mechanism that ESCAP has set up. So to all the donor countries that have been supporting our program, and to the other countries who are increasingly offering to share technical experience, technical know-how, and tools and methodologies. I'd like to thank everyone, and then also to the beneficiary countries. We are this is really an area of work that lends itself to technical cooperation on a south-south basis, on a triangular basis. We are really putting knowledge in the service of sustainable and inclusive development. And so it is really very encouraging for the Secretariat to hear the constructive dialogue that has taken place, and to learn of very tangible offers of support and sharing of knowledge. So I'd really like to sincerely thank all our member states, and we very much look forward to working with you during challenging times, but sometimes challenging times actually bring the best out of everyone. So thank you very much once again.
I thank you, Ms. Bonaparte. We shall now take up agenda item 5 on consideration of the future focus of the sub-program on disaster risk reduction. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Isabella Heng, Chief of Program Planning and Budget Section, Strategy and Program Management Division, ESCAP, to introduce this item. Ms. Heng, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to introduce Agenda Item 5, Consideration of the Future Focus of the Sub-Program. In this presentation, I will quickly walk you through the disaster risk reduction related results in the ESCAP proposed program plan for 2022, a few projects that contributes to cross-cutting areas in the context of disaster risk reduction, and the 2022 program planning process. Next slide, please. In the 2022 proposed program plan, there are two results related to disaster risk reduction. They are under program performance in 2020 on enhancement of the capacity of countries to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction, and under 2021 result on accelerating regional policy coordination for risk-informed and climate-resilient development. In 2022, the sub-program will continue to assist member states in harnessing the most recent advances in space technology applications and geospatial data. The sub-program will facilitate timely and expanded access to space-derived geospatial data, pool expertise, and resources at the regional and sub-regional levels, promote the sharing of knowledge and good practices, and create synergies with other existing regional initiatives. The above-mentioned work is expected to result in improved e-resilience and the cross-border interoperability of ICT networks that support disaster risk reduction and resilience, and the anticipation of and reduction in disaster risk through improved inter-country sharing and interoperability of geospatial data and early warning systems, especially for slow onset disaster in high-risk and low-capacity developing countries. Next slide, please. In the context of disaster risk reduction and the cross-cutting areas to be mainstreamed into the work of the committee, the subprogram is closely aligned to Sustainable Development Goals 1, 3, 5, 10, 11, 13, and 17. Some of the projects that contribute to poverty reduction and balanced integration of the three pillars of sustainable development, gender equality, and priority needs of least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and or small island developing states are operationalizing disaster risk reduction and resilient building in Asia and the Pacific, improving the use and sharing of geospatial information for resilient and sustainable development in selected pilot countries, ESCAP Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster, and Climate Preparedness, facilitating innovative action on gender-responsive, disability-inclusive disaster risk reduction policies and programs in Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. This diagram gives the typical timeline of our annual planning process. The 2022 proposed program plan was presented to the Commission at its 77th session in April this year. Subsequently, it was submitted to the Committee for Program and Coordination, which conducted the hearing on ESCAP proposed program plan on the 8th of June, and to the Advisory Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Question, which conducted the hearing on ESCAP proposed program budget on the 21st of June. The next step is for ESCAP proposed program budget for 2022 to be submitted to the 5th Committee of the General Assembly by the end of this year. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any question you may have.
I thank you very much, Ms. Hen. I now have the pleasure to invite distinguished delegates to share views and comments on the agenda item. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from China. China, please.
沙赫班的女士，尊敬的各国代表，大家好，很荣幸代表中国国家航天局，同大家分享中国在支持亚太地区航载减载方面的工作情况。一直以来，中国通过共享高分等卫星遥感数据，推动高分等卫星遥感数据在东南亚等地区落地，积极支持东南亚、亚太地区航载减载工作。尤其是近3年来，中国高分1号、2号、3号、4号等卫星，作为国际空间与重大灾害合作宪章机制的值班卫星，在印尼火山爆发、印度洪灾等国际重大灾害事件中及时响应，向亚洲及太平洋地区的24个国家提供了300多节高出面率遥感卫星数据。2020年，中国国家航天局担任国际空间与重大灾害合作宪章机制主席，在 在全球范围内推广高分卫星数据防灾减灾服务和应用，联络和培训加勒比海地区等6个国家作为国际空间与重大灾害合作信仰组织的授权用户。2021年8月18日，中国国家航天局同巴西、俄罗斯、印度和南非航天机构共同签署了与金砖国家遥感卫星工作合作的协定，共同致力于防灾减灾等全球发展问题。主席先生，现在我介绍一下近期主要工作情况。一是中国卫星观测能力继续增强。2020年9月27日，中国以一箭双星的方式成功发射环境减灾2号灾避卫星，接替在轨超区域型的环境减灾1号灾避卫星。双星卫星状态一致，具备可激光多光谱、高光谱和红外遥感能力，并将与高分1号、高分6号卫星协同观测，实现重访时少于24小时。二是中国卫星应用进一步深化。中国围绕灾害管理不同阶段监测需求，进一步完善卫星遥感监测技术与产品体系，加强业务应用研发，在精准监测精准性、及时性上多下功夫，为灾害综合风险监测、灾害应急监测提供更加及时、更有效的支撑产品。在服务自然灾害监测的同时，进一步拓展应用领域，加强对安全生产自发事故的应急监测支撑。三是中国空间国际合作进一步拓展。中国不断加强与联合国灾害管理及反应天气信息平台北京办公室持续跟踪EO 国际合作。仅2020年，中国国家航天局通过空间与重大灾害国际协调国际组织，向世界各国提供中国遥感卫星数据37次，包含中国高分1号、高分2号、高分3号、高分4号和风云卫星，涉及菲律宾、印度尼西亚、玻利维亚、俄罗斯等24个国家。在世界重大灾害中，如毛里求斯席卷东南亚各国洪水、乌克兰水灾、萨尔瓦多洪涝等事件中，及时提供中国的高分辨率卫星影像，开展监测服务，贡献了中国力量。中国国家航天局还通过亚太空间合作组织，向因地震、洪水等自然灾害影响的伊朗、巴基斯坦、土耳其等亚太和墨西哥提供编程影像历史数据25景，共计34。此外，中国开展面向仙台框架地球观测综合应用研究国际合作项目，有力推空间减灾国际合作与交流。最后，感谢各位对中国空间技术防灾减灾应用发展的关注和支持。中国国家航天局将一如既往地支持亚太经济社会减灾委员会的工作。谢谢大家。
I thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from China. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate from Indonesia, whom I now invite to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you on your leadership in the success of this seventh Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. I would like to also express appreciation to the Secretariat for laying out the future focus on the region's disaster risk reduction strategies. Responding to the presented future focuses, Indonesia would like to share 3 points that we see as essential to be integrated. First, community engagement. From 2019 until today, Indonesia has experienced more than 8,200 disasters from small to big scales. And since the beginning of 2020, we have seen that the adverse impacts of disaster were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also learned that during crisis, communities at local level are the ones that are always affected first. Within those communities, vulnerable groups, including women, children, persons with disabilities, and elders, are disproportionately affected. Against this backdrop, we see the communities at all levels should always be put at the center of every DRR action. By putting community at the driving seat, local capacity will be developed to become the first responder to the risk of disaster. Seeing the importance of this matter, on October this year, Indonesia will host the second regional conference on humanitarian assistance with the theme Advancing National and Local Humanitarian Capacities in a Changing World. The regional conference will invite governmental and non-governmental humanitarian actors in Southeast Asia and Pacific to share innovations on how leadership of national and local communities can be reinforced. Second, more robust efforts are needed to promote investment on DRR, climate adaptations, and health. In many parts of the world, including in Indonesia, we have witnessed that years of development progress can be easily disrupted or even destroyed by disaster in counts of days and hours. The ever more complex, overlapping, and compounding riskscapes have required us to take new approach in responding to risk. DRR, climate adaptation, and health strategies in this regard must not be seen as an additional burden to development process. Instead, it is an investment to sustain the development progress we have already reached. As the host of the upcoming Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2022, Indonesia stands firm to ensure that promotion of DRR, climate change, and health agenda as an integral part of sustainable development agenda. Working closely with the UNDRR as the organizer, we aim to ensure that the 3 agendas are meaningfully discussed and are mainstream as the requirements to reach a sustainable development. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, last, we need to scale up cooperation at regional and global levels. The current context and contour of disaster and hazards have trespassed all geographical territorial borders. Therefore, regional and global cooperation plays eminent role. Nevertheless, the data shows otherwise. As we reach the midterm of the Sendai framework, target F on international cooperation remains the least parameter to be fulfilled every year. With this in mind, Indonesia is hopeful that the presented focuses in the agenda item could promote more international cooperation in the region. And I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Indonesia. Are there any other requests to speak from delegates? I see none. And then I would like to open the floor for interventions from observers who may wish to address the committee. Are there any requests from observers? I see none. Okay. Then we shall now proceed to agenda item 6, other matters. Under this agenda item, the committee is invited to take note of the following. The chair and the vice chairs of the 7th session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction examined the credentials of representatives received by the member states in accordance with Rule 12 of the ESCAP Rules of Procedure. The Bureau noted that credentials had been received by a total 33 member states and found them to be in order. I now open the floor for any comments under this item. Does any delegation wish to raise any other matters? If yes, please click the button Request to Speak. I see none. Okay, then this concludes the second day of the 7th session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. We will reconvene at 2 p.m. tomorrow under the same Kudo link to begin our discussions on agenda item 7 on the adoption of the report. The report will be available to delegates tomorrow at noon. Before closing the session, I would like to give the floor to the secretariat for some announcements. Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, two side events of the committee. Number one, United Nations Satellite Center, UNOSAT, celebrating 2 decades of satellite imagery applications for enhanced disaster resilience. And number two, Sand and Dust Storm Risk Assessment in Asia and Pacific. Potential for concerted action at regional level to reduce risk and strengthen resilience will take place today from 12:30 to 1:40. CMU will share the YouTube links. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the Secretariat, and this concludes the second day of the 7th session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. I thank you very much and see you tomorrow.